They called her a gold digger. They called her trash. When Audrey signed the divorce papers without asking for a single dime of the Harrington fortune, her ex-husband laughed in her face. He thought he had won. He thought she was walking out of his mansion to sleep on the streets. He was wrong. Dead wrong. Because he didn't know that the woman scrubbing his floors wasn't who she said she was. And he certainly didn't expect that, less than an hour later, the most expensive private jet in the world would touch down on the tarmac, not for a billionaire CEO, not for a head of state, but for the girl who just left with nothing. The silence in the room was heavy, smelling of old money, beeswax polish, and the suffocating scent of Victoria Harrington's Chanel No. 5. Audrey sat on the edge of the velvet armchair, her hands folded neatly in her lap. She wore a simple grey cardigan that had seen better days, and jeans that were fading at the knees. Across from her, sitting behind a mahogany desk that cost more than most people's cars, was Liam. Liam Harrington. The man she had loved for 3 years. The man she had nursed through a bout of pneumonia. The man she had cooked for, cleaned for, and supported while he played the role of the stressed heir to the Harrington real estate empire. Now, he wouldn't even look her in the eye. "Just sign it, Audrey," his mother, Victoria, snapped from the corner. She was swirling a glass of Chardonnay, even though it was barely 10 in the morning. "Stop dragging this out. We all know why you're hesitating. You're waiting for a payout. Well, honey, look at the prenup. You get what you came with, which, if I recall, was a suitcase full of rags and a sob story." Audrey looked at Liam. "Liam, is this really how you want to do this?" Liam finally looked up. His face, once handsome to her, now looked sharp and cruel. He adjusted his silk tie, the one she had bought him for his birthday by saving up grocery money for 3 months. "Mother is right, Audrey," Liam said, his voice devoid of emotion. "It's over. The novelty has worn off. I need a wife who fits my world, someone who knows how to host a gala, not someone who panics over which fork to use for the salad. You were a phase, a rebellion against my expectations. But I'm done rebelling." He slid the document across the table. "Sign it. Leave the house key. You can keep the clothes on your back. Consider it a parting gift." Audrey felt a strange calmness wash over her. For months, she had tried to be the perfect wife. She had endured Victoria's sneers, Liam's late nights, and the whispers of their society friends who treated her like the help. She had stayed because she believed in the vows, for better or for worse. But this was the end of the line. She reached for the Mont Blanc pen resting on the desk. "I don't want your money, Liam," Audrey said softly, "and I don't want a settlement." Victoria let out a shrill, mocking laugh. "Oh, listen to her, playing the martyr. She thinks if she acts noble, you'll cut her a check out of pity. Don't fall for it, Liam." "I'm not playing anything," Audrey said. Her hand didn't shake as she put the pen to the paper. The sound of the nib scratching against the thick legal bond was the only sound in the room. Audrey C.K. She signed it. She pushed the papers back. "There," Audrey stood up. "You have your freedom, and you keep your money, all of it. I hope it keeps you warm at night." Liam blinked, looking at the papers. He seemed momentarily stunned that she hadn't fought, hadn't begged, hadn't asked for alimony. But the surprise was quickly replaced by a smug grin. "You're an idiot," Liam sneered. "You could have fought for at least 10 grand. Now, you're walking out of here with nothing. Where will you go? Back to that trailer park? Or are you going to beg for a shift at the diner?" "That's none of your concern anymore," Audrey said. She turned to the door. "Wait!" Victoria barked. Audrey paused, her hand on the brass knob. "Open your bag," Victoria demanded, stepping forward. I want to make sure you haven't stolen any of the silver. Or my jewelry." Audrey turned slowly. Her eyes, usually a warm hazel, were now cold steel. She dropped her battered canvas duffel bag to the floor and unzipped it. Inside, there was nothing but 2 T-shirts, a spare pair of jeans, a photo of her late mother, and a small, leather-bound notebook. Victoria kicked the bag with the toe of her expensive heel, shifting the clothes around. "Pathetic," she muttered. "Absolutely pathetic. Fine, get out, and don't think about coming back to beg when you realize the real world doesn't care about your dignity." Audrey zipped the bag back up. She slung it over her shoulder. "Goodbye, Liam," she said. Liam didn't answer. He was already pouring himself a drink, celebrating the removal of the stain on his reputation. Audrey walked out of the massive oak double doors of the Harrington estate. The heavy door clicked shut behind her, with a finality that echoed in her chest. She walked down the long, winding driveway, lined with manicured hedges. It started to drizzle, a cold, grey rain that soaked through her thin cardigan instantly. From the window of the study, Liam watched her go, a tiny, solitary figure walking toward the main gate. "She's walking to the bus stop," Liam chuckled, taking a sip of scotch. "It's a 3-mile walk. She really is destitute." "Good riddance," Victoria said, raising her glass. "To the future, Liam. A future with someone of status." They toasted, warm and dry in their mansion, watching the woman they thought was a nobody disappear into the rain. They had no idea that the nobody walking down their driveway was about to make a phone call that would shake the very ground they stood on. The rain was coming down harder now, plastering Audrey's hair to her face. She walked until she was well out of sight of the Harrington gates, around the bend of the winding country road that led toward the highway. She stopped at a small, secluded lay-by, a spot usually used by maintenance trucks. She didn't look like a woman who had just lost her home and her husband. She stood taller now, the slump in her shoulders, the posture of a woman constantly apologizing for her existence, was gone. She reached into her pocket. She didn't pull out the cracked Android phone Liam allowed her to use. She reached into the inner lining of her duffel bag and pulled out a sleek, black satellite phone, a device that cost more than Liam's car. She dialed a single number. "Status," she said, her voice crisp and commanding. Gone was the soft, timid tone she had used for 3 years. "Ma'am," a deep voice answered instantly on the other end. "We have been holding pattern. We are currently 10 minutes out from Harrington Private Airfield. The crew is ready." "Divert the car to my current location. I'm done walking," Audrey said. "Understood. Estimated time of arrival. 2 minutes. Welcome back, Miss Kensington." Kensington. The name felt heavy on her tongue, familiar and dangerous. For 3 years she had been Audrey Smith, nobody, orphan, waitress. But before that, she was Audrey Kensington, sole heiress to Kensington Global, one of the largest private equity conglomerates in the Western Hemisphere. She had left that life behind because she wanted to know if someone could love her for her, not the billions attached to her name. She met Liam in a coffee shop 3 years ago. He was charming, seemingly kind. She thought she had found it. She hid her identity, cutting off her access to the family trust, living on a waitress's wage to see if he was real. He wasn't. She had found her answer, and the experiment was over. 2 minutes later, a matte black SUV with tinted windows, looking more like a military vehicle than a luxury car, screeched around the bend. It came to a halt right in front of her. 2 men in dark suits jumped out, opening umbrellas instantly to shield her from the rain. "Miss Kensington," the lead security officer said, bowing his head slightly. "We have fresh clothes in the vehicle. The jet is fueled and cleared for takeoff to New York." "Thank you, James," Audrey said, sliding into the warm leather interior. She peeled off the wet grey cardigan and tossed it onto the floor of the car. She never wanted to see it again. "Where to first, Mom?" James asked from the front seat. "The airfield," Audrey said, her eyes narrowing. "Liam is flying to Miami today for the real estate summit, isn't he?" "Yes, Ma'am. His flight is scheduled to depart in 30 minutes. He's flying commercial, first class, but he's currently in the VIP lounge at the private terminal. He likes to network there before heading to the main concourse." Audrey smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Perfect. Take me to the tarmac. I want to make sure my departure is noticed." The Harrington Private Airfield was a small, exclusive strip used by the local elite. Liam Harrington was currently standing by the window of the lounge, swirling another drink. He was surrounded by a few business associates, bragging about his upcoming deals. "Yeah, just finalized the divorce this morning," Liam was saying loudly. "Cut the dead weight. She was holding me back, you know. Sweet girl, but no ambition. No vision." His friends laughed sycophantically. "You did the right thing, Liam," one of them said. "You need a power couple dynamic. Someone who brings assets to the table." "Exactly," Liam nodded. "I mean, she left with a duffel bag. Can you imagine? I almost felt bad for her. She's probably waiting for the number 42 bus right now in the rain." Suddenly, the conversation in the lounge died down. Everyone turned toward the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the runway. A low, powerful rumble shook the glass. It wasn't the usual buzz of the small Cessnas or the light Learjets that the local millionaires used. This was the roar of heavy, high-bypass turbofans. "What is that?" someone whispered. Descending from the grey clouds, cutting through the rain like a silver arrow, was a monster. It was a Bombardier Global 7500, the Rolls-Royce of the sky. It was massive, sleek, and painted in a custom deep midnight blue with silver accents. It was a plane that belonged to heads of state or billionaires in the top 0.1%. "Who is landing that here?" Liam frowned, stepping closer to the glass. "That's a $70 million aircraft. Nobody in this town owns one of those." The massive jet touched down smoothly, its reverse thrusters kicking up a spray of water that looked like a royal salute. It taxied not to the public hangars, but directly to the exclusive VIP disembarkation point, right in front of where Liam was standing. The stairs of the jet unfolded automatically. A black SUV, the one Audrey was in, raced across the tarmac and pulled up right next to the stairs. "Must be a celebrity," Liam muttered, feeling a pang of jealousy. He prided himself on being the big fish in this pond. This jet made his family's wealth look like pocket change. The door of the SUV opened. A woman stepped out. She wasn't wearing a wet grey cardigan anymore. She was wearing a sharp, tailored white pantsuit that screamed power. She had oversized sunglasses on, and her hair was pulled back in a sleek, severe bun. She looked like a queen returning to her throne. Liam squinted. "Is that—" The woman paused at the bottom of the stairs. She turned, just for a second, toward the glass window of the terminal. She took off her sunglasses. Liam dropped his glass. It shattered on the floor, splashing scotch over his polished shoes. It was Audrey. But it wasn't the Audrey he knew. This woman stood with a spine of steel. She handed her duffel bag to a flight attendant, who bowed low to her. "No," Liam whispered, his face draining of color. "That's impossible. She's broke. She has nothing." "You know her?" his friend asked, eyes wide. That's my ex-wife," Liam stammered. "Your ex-wife?" The friend laughed in disbelief. "Liam, the tail number on that plane is registered to Kensington Global. That's the Kensington family jet. If that's your ex-wife, You just divorced one of the richest women on the planet." Liam felt the room spin. He watched as Audrey walked up the stairs of the jet. She didn't look back again. The heavy door sealed shut. Seconds later, the massive engines roared to life, shaking the windows of the lounge. The jet taxied out and took off, soaring into the clouds, leaving Liam standing in a puddle of spilled scotch and regret. He grabbed his phone and dialed her number. "The number you have reached is no longer in service." 6 months had passed since the day the Global 7500 jet tore a hole in the sky above Harrington Airfield, taking Liam's illusion of control with it. 6 months, and the Harrington estate felt less like a manor and more like a mausoleum. Liam sat in the same study where he had forced Audrey to sign the papers. The room looked identical, the heavy oak furniture, the leather-bound books that nobody read. But the atmosphere had curdled. The air was thick with unspoken accusations, and the sour smell of Liam's mounting anxiety. He wasn't the sleek, arrogant heir anymore. His expensive suits felt a little looser, his eyes were rimmed with dark circles that concealer couldn't hide, and his hands had developed a persistent, subtle tremor. On his desk, next to a half-empty tumbler of whiskey, at 11 a.m., was a framed photograph. He had dug it out of a box in the basement a week after the divorce. It was a picture taken 3 years ago on a pier in Santa Monica. Audrey was laughing, her hair blowing across her face, wearing a cheap hooded sweatshirt, holding a half-eaten corn dog. She looked radiant. Real. Liam stared at the photo, a knot tightening in his stomach. He hated that photo. He looked at it every day. The revelation on the tarmac had broken something in him. The knowledge that he had spent 3 years married to Audrey Kensington, the goddess of Wall Street, the woman whose family trust fund could buy and sell the Harrington empire 10 times over, and treated her like a hired maid, ate away at his sanity. He had tried to find her, of course. He hired private investigators, the best money could buy. They all came back empty-handed, pale and terrified. One had simply returned Liam's deposit check with a note that said, "Mr. Harrington, we were advised by sources very high up to cease this inquiry immediately for our own professional safety. Do not contact us again." Audrey had vanished back into the stratosphere of the ultra-rich, a world Liam thought he belonged to, until he realized he was just a tourist looking up from the sidewalk. The door to the study banged open, shattering his pathetic reverie. Victoria Harrington marched in, bringing a cold draught of air with her. She looked thinner, harder. The stress of the last 6 months had etched deep lines around her mouth. "Still moping over the help?" Victoria snapped, gesturing vaguely at the photo on his desk with her lit cigarette. "She wasn't the help, Mother," Liam grated out, slamming the photo face down. "She was a Kensington, and if you hadn't been such a shrew to her every single day, maybe she wouldn't have left us high and dry." Victoria laughed, a harsh, barking sound. "Oh, please, don't rewrite history, Liam. You were bored with her. You said she smelled like meatloaf and poverty. You wanted her gone as much as I did. Who could have known she was playing some sick little Marie Antoinette game, pretending to be poor for kicks?" She walked over to the desk and stubbed her cigarette out in his expensive crystal ashtray. "Besides," she hissed, leaning over the desk, her eyes glittering with panic, "we have bigger problems than your bruised ego over losing the golden goose. The bank called again." Liam winced. "Which one?" "All of them. The Miami project is dead in the water, Liam. Dead. The contractors walked off the job yesterday because the checks bounced. We are leveraged to the hilt." The Miami Real Estate Summit, the one he was supposed to fly to the day Audrey left, had been the beginning of the end. Distracted and reeling from the shock on the tarmac, Liam had botched the presentations. He'd made desperate, risky deals to try and prove he didn't need Kensington money. Those deals had soured spectacularly. The Harrington family was currently $80 million in the hole, with assets that were rapidly depreciating. The wolves weren't just at the door, they were in the foyer, measuring the drapes. "I handled it," Liam lied, rubbing his temples. "I'm talking to new investors." "Who?" Victoria demanded. "Everyone in town knows we're toxic right now. Nobody will touch us." "There's a new firm, Apex Ventures, based out of Zurich and New York. They specialize in distressed assets," Victoria sneered. "Vultures, that's what they are. They'll pick our bones clean." "We don't have a choice, Mother," Liam shouted, finally losing his temper. He stood up, knocking over his chair. "It's Apex or bankruptcy. It's Apex or we lose this house, the cars, the club memberships, everything. Do you want to apply for a job at the diner where you used to mock Audrey for working?" The silence in the room was total. The reality hung between them. Victoria paled. The thought of actual poverty was more terrifying to her than death. "Fix it, Liam," she whispered, her voice trembling with genuine fear for the first time. "I don't care whose boots you have to lick. You get that meeting with Apex, and you get their money. Do not fail me." Liam watched his mother leave the room. He felt sick. He picked up the phone, his hands shaking violently now, and dialed the number for the ultra-exclusive, incredibly secretive Apex Ventures. He had to beg for a meeting. He had to sell his soul to strangers just to keep the lights on. He had no idea that the soul he was about to try and sell was one that had already been weighed, measured, and found wanting. The headquarters of Apex Ventures in downtown Manhattan was not a building designed to make visitors feel welcome. It was designed to make them feel small. The lobby was a cavernous expanse of polished grey slate and frosted glass, silent except for the hum of unseen technology. The air was colder than outside. There were no comfortable chairs, no magazines, just a single, sculptural reception desk, manned by two women who looked like runway models and typed silently on keyboards that made no sound. Liam Harrington sat on a hard, minimalist steel bench, sweating through his best Italian suit. He had been waiting for 90 minutes. Every 15 minutes, he would approach the desk, trying to project confidence. "Excuse me. My appointment was for 2:30 p.m. It's now 3:30. The receptionist wouldn't even look up from her screen. "The CEO is wrapping up a call with the Prime Minister of Japan. You will wait." It wasn't a request. Liam sat back down, feeling the humiliation burn his cheeks. 6 months ago, he wouldn't wait 5 minutes for a senator. Now, here he was, a supplicant. He clutched his leather portfolio case tightly. Inside were the doctored financial projections for Harrington Real Estate, his desperate attempt to paint a sinking ship as a fixer-upper opportunity. Finally, at 4:15 p.m., one of the receptionists stood up. "The CIO will see you now. Top floor, conference room A." Liam took the private elevator up 40 stories. His ears popped. The doors slid open onto a hallway that was even more intimidating than the lobby. The carpet was so thick it felt like walking on moss. The art on the walls were original Basquiat's and Rothko's, millions of dollars just hanging there casually. He approached the massive double doors of Conference Room A. He took a deep breath, adjusted his tie, put on his best $1 million smile, the one that used to charm investors and women alike, and pushed the doors open. The room was enormous. 2 entire walls were floor-to-ceiling glass, offering a panoramic view of Central Park and the city skyline below. The city looked like a toy set from up here. In the center of the room was a conference table made of a single slab of black marble, easily 30 feet long. At the very far end of the table, a solitary figure stood with their back to the door, looking out over the city. The figure was slight, dressed in a dark, impeccably tailored power suit. "Mr. Harrington," the figure said, without turning around. The voice was low, calm, and sent a bolt of absolute freezing terror straight down Liam's spine. He knew that voice. He had heard it whisper, "I love you," in the dark. He had heard it meekly ask for grocery money. He had heard it say, "Goodbye, Liam," in the rain 6 months ago. "Please, take a seat at the other end." Liam couldn't move. His legs felt like lead. "Audrey?" he whispered, his voice cracking. The figure turned slowly. It was her. But it wasn't. The Audrey standing at the end of that marble table bore zero resemblance to the woman who had scrubbed his floors. Her hair, once always tied back in a messy ponytail, was now a sharp, sleek, angular cut that framed her face like armor. Her makeup was flawless, highlighting eyes that were no longer warm hazel, but hard, polished amber. She wore no jewelry except for a single, massive diamond solitaire ring on her right hand, a family heirloom worth more than Liam's entire company in its current state. She didn't smile. There was absolutely no recognition of their past intimacy in her eyes. She looked at him the way a scientist looks at a microbe under a microscope. "In this building, Mr. Harrington, you will address me as Ms. Kensington, or Madam CEO, if you prefer the formality." Liam staggered to the chair at the opposite end of the table and collapsed into it. He felt like he was hallucinating. You own Apex Ventures?" "I own many things, Liam," Audrey said coldly, remaining standing. She pressed a button on the table, and blinds automatically lowered over the windows, plunging the room into a dim, serious light. "Apex is merely the acquisition arm I use for cleanup projects." Liam's mind was racing, trying to find purchase on this slippery new reality. His ex-wife, the waitress, was the shark he had come to beg for mercy. "Audrey, Miss Kensington, look, this is incredible," Liam stammered, his charm offensive failing miserably. "I had no idea. If you had known I was worth billions, you wouldn't have cheated on me with my mother's personal assistant," Audrey interrupted, her voice level and devoid of anger, just stating facts. "Or you wouldn't have made me beg for $50 to buy new jeans when mine tore?" Liam turned scarlet. "You knew about—" "I know everything, Liam. I knew everything then, and I know everything now. I know you're 80 million in debt. I know the banks have blacklisted you. I know your mother pawned her emerald necklace last week just to pay the landscaping staff so the neighbors wouldn't suspect you're destitute." Liam felt stripped bare. There were no secrets here. "Why did you take this meeting?" Liam asked, his voice hollow. "If you hate me, why bring me here?" Audrey finally walked toward the table. She didn't sit. She placed her hands flat on the marble and leaned forward slightly. "Hate requires energy, Liam. I don't hate you. You're an irrelevance. A bad investment, I wrote off." She paused, her eyes boring into him. "I took this meeting because you are looking for a buyer for Harrington Real Estate, and I am in the market for distressed properties." Liam felt a flicker of pathetic hope. "So, you'll invest? You'll help us turn it around? Look, Audrey, I know we ended badly, but the company has good bones. With your capital, we could—" "Stop!" Audrey said. The word was soft, but it hit like a slap. She slid a thin manila folder down the long marble table. It stopped perfectly at the edge in front of him. "I'm not going to invest in your company, Liam. I'm not going to save it." She straightened up, towering over him from the other end of the table. "I'm going to buy it, lock, stock, and barrel. I'm going to absorb it into Apex, fire the entire executive suite, starting with you and your mother, and sell off the assets piecemeal to recoup the debt. Liam stared at the folder. You want to liquidate us? Destroy my family legacy? Your legacy is debt and bad decisions, Audrey said cruelly. Open the folder. That is my offer. It is a non-negotiable, all-cash offer. It expires when you walk out that door. Liam opened the folder with trembling hands. There was a single page inside, a purchase agreement. His eyes scanned down to the final figure. The purchase price. He gasped. The sound was loud in the silent room. "This is a joke," Liam whispered, looking up at her with watery eyes. "This isn't even enough to cover the bank loans. We'd be left with nothing. Less than nothing. We'd still owe millions." Audrey Kensington smiled for the first time since he entered the room. It was a terrifying, predatory smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I know," she said softly. "It's exactly what your mother offered me when I left." "Nothing. It seems only fair, doesn't it, Liam? The symmetry of it." She checked her diamond watch. "You have 60 seconds to sign, or I pull the offer and let the banks foreclose on Monday morning. Either way, Harrington Real Estate is finished. The only question is whether you want to walk out of here owning the clothes on your back, or not even that." Liam looked at the pen resting beside the paper. The same kind of expensive Montblanc pen she had used to sign her rights away 6 months ago. He looked up at the woman who held his life in her hands, realizing that the rain-soaked girl he thought he'd discarded was actually a tsunami that had just made landfall. The silence in conference room A was deafening, broken only by the hum of the air conditioning and the pounding of Liam's own heart in his ears. 60 seconds. Liam looked at the document. The numbers blurred. Selling the company, his father's legacy, his mother's pride, for scraps. It was unthinkable. But the alternative was a public foreclosure, seizing of personal assets, and potential jail time for unpaid debts that he had tried to hide. "You can't do this," Liam said, his voice cracking. He looked up at Audrey, searching for a trace of the woman who used to rub his back when he had a headache. "Audrey, please. I know I hurt you. I was an idiot. I was blind. But this is nuclear. You're destroying my life." Audrey didn't blink. She walked slowly around the table, her heels clicking rhythmically on the marble floor. The sound echoed like a ticking clock. "You destroyed your own life, Liam," she said, her voice devoid of pity. "I'm just the one sweeping up the debris. Do you remember our 3rd anniversary? The one where you told me you had to work late?" Liam swallowed hard. Yes. I waited up with a homemade dinner until 2 a.m., Audrey continued, stopping right behind his chair. She leaned down, her lips close to his ear. "I knew you weren't working. I knew you were at the St. Regis with Sarah, my mother's assistant. I knew because I paid for the room. I used my savings, the grocery money you let me keep, to hire the PI that night. I wanted to be wrong. I prayed to be wrong." Liam froze. He felt the blood drain from his face. She knew. She had known for years. "I stayed because I wanted to see if you had a conscience," she whispered. "I gave you a year to confess, a year to change. You didn't. You just got better at lying." She straightened up and tapped the face of her diamond watch. 10 seconds, Liam. Sign the paper or get out. If you leave without signing, my legal team files the foreclosure notice at 9 a.m. tomorrow." Liam looked at the pen. His hand shook so violently he could barely hold it. He thought of his mother, Victoria. She would scream. She would rage. But if he didn't sign, she would be homeless. At least this way, the debts were wiped. They would have nothing, but they would be free of the creditors. He gripped the Mont Blanc. He pressed the nib to the paper. Liam J. Harrington. The signature was messy, jagged, a visual representation of his broken spirit. "Done," he choked out, pushing the folder away as if it were burning hot. "Are you happy now?" Audrey didn't answer. She pressed a button on the intercom. "James, come in. Escort Mr. Harrington out, and call the acquisitions team. The deal is closed." Two security guards entered. Liam stood up, his legs wobbly. He felt lightheaded. "Audrey," he said, turning back at the door. "What happens to the house?" Audrey was already looking at her tablet, scrolling through data. She didn't look up. "The house was collateral for the business loans you took out in January," she said continuously. "It belongs to Apex Ventures now. You have 24 hours to vacate the premises. Take only personal items. Anything of value, art, jewelry, furniture, is now company property to be liquidated against the debt." 24 hours, Liam gasped. "That's impossible. You made me leave in 10 minutes, Audrey replied, finally meeting his eyes with a gaze that could cut glass. "I'm giving you a day. Consider it a final act of charity. Goodbye, Liam." The drive back to the Harrington estate was a blur. Liam didn't remember navigating the highway. He just remembered the feeling of impending doom. When he pulled into the driveway, he saw the moving trucks. They weren't there to help him pack. They were sleek, black trucks with the Apex Ventures logo on the side. Men in uniforms were already cataloguing the garden statues. Liam burst through the front door. "What is the meaning of this?" Victoria was screaming in the foyer. She was clutching a porcelain vase, pulling it away from a man with a clipboard. "Get your hands off my things. I will call the police." "Mother, stop," Liam said, his voice dead. Victoria spun around, her eyes wild. "Liam, thank God. Tell these vultures to leave. They say the house has been sold. Tell them they're crazy." Liam walked over and gently took the vase from her hands. He handed it to the man with the clipboard. "It's true, Mother." Victoria stared at him, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. "What?" "I signed it over," Liam said, collapsing onto the bottom step of the grand staircase. "I signed everything over. The company, the accounts, the house. It's gone. We're bankrupt." You sold us out?" Victoria shrieked. She raised her hand and slapped him across the face. The sound echoed through the cavernous hall. "You coward! You useless, spineless coward! Who did you sell to? Who has done this to us?" Liam rubbed his stinging cheek. He looked up at his mother, seeing her for the first time, not as a matriarch, but as a bitter, terrified old woman. "Audrey," he said softly. Victoria froze. "The maid?" "She's not a maid, Mother. She's Audrey Kensington. She owns Apex Ventures. She owns the bank that held our loans. She owns everything." The colour drained from Victoria's face so fast Liam thought she might faint. She slumped against the wall, sliding down until she hit the floor. "Kensington," she whispered. "The billionaire family. And I made her polish the silver." "Yes," Liam said, a hysterical laugh bubbling up in his chest. "You did. And now she's taking the silver back." 3 weeks later, Liam sat on the edge of a lumpy mattress in a Motel 6 on the outskirts of the city. The room smelled of stale smoke and lemon pledge. His Italian suits were hanging on a flimsy rack in the corner, the only remnants of his former life. He turned on the small, grainy television. Every channel was covering the same story. Breaking news. Shocking revelations in Harrington real estate collapse. Liam leaned forward, clutching a cup of instant coffee. The screen showed a press conference taking place in front of what used to be the Harrington HQ. The sign had already been removed. Standing at the podium, looking regal in a navy blue suit, was Audrey. Flashes of cameras erupted like lightning around her. "Why is she doing this?" Liam muttered. "She already won. Why does she have to dance on the grave? On the screen, Audrey adjusted the microphone. She looked directly into the camera. "Ladies and gentlemen," Audrey began, her voice steady and authoritative. "When Apex Ventures acquired Harrington Real Estate 3 weeks ago, our intention was simply to liquidate a failing asset. However, during our audit of the company's internal files, we discovered something that could not be ignored." Liam frowned. "What files?" Audrey held up a thick binder. "For the past 5 years, Harrington Real Estate has been cutting corners on safety regulations in their low-income housing projects in order to fund the lavish lifestyles of its owners. They used substandard concrete, they bribed inspectors, they ignored structural warnings." Liam felt a cold sweat break out on his forehead. The Riverview project. He had signed off on the cheaper materials to save money for his new Porsche. He thought no one would ever check the supply logs. "These buildings," Audrey continued, her voice hardening with righteous anger, "are death traps. Hundreds of families are living in apartments that could collapse in a minor tremor. This was not just bad business, this was criminal negligence." The crowd of reporters gasped. "We cannot in good conscience simply liquidate this company," Audrey announced. "Therefore, I am announcing that Apex Ventures will be setting aside a $50 million relief fund. We will be relocating all affected tenants immediately to safe housing at our own expense. We will be tearing down the unsafe structures and rebuilding them properly." She paused, and the camera zoomed in on her face. "Furthermore, we have turned over all evidence of fraud, bribery, and negligence to the district attorney's office. As of this morning, warrants have been issued for the arrest of the former CEO, Liam Harrington, and the CFO, Victoria Harrington." Liam dropped his coffee. The hot liquid splashed over his bare feet, but he didn't feel it. Arrest warrants. Sirens wailed in the distance. Real sirens, not on the TV. He ran to the window of the motel room and peered through the blinds. 2 police cruisers were pulling into the motel parking lot. They knew exactly where he was. He stumbled back, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. This wasn't just revenge. Audrey hadn't just taken his money. She had uncovered his sins. She wasn't just a scorned ex-wife. She was the executioner of his corruption. He looked at the TV one last time. A reporter was shouting a question at Audrey. "Miss Kensington, did you know about this when you were married to him?" Audrey looked at the camera, her expression softening into something sad and profound. "I knew he was a man who loved money more than people," she said. "But I never imagined he would risk lives for it. I thought I left a broken marriage. It turns out I escaped a crime scene." The door to Liam's motel room burst open with a loud crash. "Police! Hands in the air!" As Liam was shoved against the wall and handcuffed, he realized the true depth of his mistake. He hadn't just underestimated Audrey's bank account. He had underestimated her morality. He thought she was weak because she was kind. He didn't realize that kindness, when betrayed, can become the most dangerous weapon of all. The story didn't end with Liam in handcuffs. That would be too simple. The trial of the Harrington too became the media spectacle of the year. Audrey didn't attend a single day of the trial. She didn't need to. The evidence she provided was watertight. Instead, on the day of the verdict, she was standing on the balcony of her penthouse in Manhattan, looking out over the city. James, her head of security, walked out with a glass of champagne. "The jury is back, Ma'am," James said quietly. "Guilty on all counts. Liam got 10 years. Victoria got 5. Audrey took the glass but didn't drink. She looked at the bubbles rising to the surface. "Do you feel better?" James asked. "Is it closure?" Audrey sighed, looking at the sunset reflecting off the glass skyscrapers. "It's not about feeling better, James. It's about balance. They took everything from me emotionally. I took everything from them financially. But the prison sentences, that wasn't me. That was their own karma catching up. She took a sip of the champagne. But there is one loose end, she said, her eyes narrowing slightly. Ma'am? The woman, Audrey said. Sarah, the assistant he cheated with. She wasn't just a mistress. My audit found her name on several shell companies used to launder the money for the concrete bribes. She was the architect of the fraud, James. Liam was too stupid to come up with it on his own. James raised an eyebrow. She's currently in the south of France, I believe, living off the money she siphoned away. Audrey smiled. It was the smile of the hunter who has spotted fresh tracks. Prep the jet, James, she said, turning back into the apartment. We're going to Nice. The cleanup isn't finished yet. The French Riviera shimmered under the Mediterranean sun, a stark contrast to the grey prison walls that now enclosed Liam Harrington. Sarah sat on the terrace of the Hôtel du Cap Eden Rock in Antibes, wearing oversized sunglasses and a wide-brimmed hat. She sipped a glass of rosé that cost more than her old weekly salary as a personal assistant. She checked her phone. The news from New York was everywhere. Harrington dynasty crumbles. CEO jailed. Sarah smiled, a small, cruel curving of her red lips. She had played the game perfectly. She had seduced Liam, not because she loved him, God, no. He was a whiny, entitled child, but because he was the perfect patsy. She had convinced him to cut corners on the construction materials. She had set up the shell companies. She had funneled the difference, nearly $12 million, into offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands, accessible only by her. Liam was in prison, Victoria was ruined, and Sarah was here, wealthy, free, and invisible. Mademoiselle, a waiter approached her table. There is a guest who would like to join you. Sarah frowned. I didn't expect anyone. Tell them I'm busy. I'm afraid she insisted, the waiter said, stepping aside. Sarah looked up. The glass of rosé slipped from her fingers and shattered on the expensive stone tiles. Standing there, backlit by the azure sea, was Audrey. She wasn't wearing a power suit today. She was dressed in a flowing white sundress that looked deceptively simple, but was likely bespoke silk. She looked effortless, dangerous. Hello, Sarah, Audrey said, sliding into the chair opposite her. Enjoying the view? Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs, but she forced herself to regain composure. She was in France. Audrey had no jurisdiction here. Audrey, Sarah said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. I heard about the trial. So tragic. I was just taking some time away to process the shock. Poor Liam. Cut the act, Sarah, Audrey said, signaling the waiter to bring a fresh glass. I know about the shell companies. Orion Holdings, Blue Jay LLC. Very creative names. Sarah's eyes narrowed. I don't know what you're talking about. I was just an employee. You were the architect, Audrey corrected calmly. My forensic accountants found the digital trail. You were sloppy, Sarah. You thought because you used a VPN, you were invisible? You logged into the Cayman accounts from the Harrington office IP address 3 times. Sarah laughed, but it sounded brittle. So what? Proving I logged in isn't proving I stole anything. And even if you could prove it, the money is gone. It's in a jurisdiction the US courts can't touch. You can't touch me, Audrey. I won. Audrey leaned back, crossing her legs. She looked at Sarah with a mixture of pity and amusement. You think money is the only power I have? Audrey asked. You think I came all the way to France just to talk to you? What are you going to do? Sarah sneered. Call the police. Interpol takes months to process extradition requests for white-collar crimes. By the time they file the paperwork, I'll be in Dubai. Audrey took a slow sip of water. "Actually, I didn't call the police," Audrey said. "I called the bank." Sarah frowned. "Which bank?" "The bank in the Caymans where you hold your $12 million, Audrey said. "Specifically, the First Royal Bank of the Antilles." "So," Sarah scoffed, "they have strict privacy laws." "They do," Audrey nodded. "Usually. But see, Sarah, you didn't do your homework. Last month, Kensington Global, my family's company, acquired a majority stake in the parent company that owns First Royal Bank." Sarah went pale. "I own the bank, Sarah," Audrey whispered, "and as the owner, I authorized an internal audit this morning. We flagged your accounts for suspicious activity linked to international money laundering. Your assets were frozen 20 minutes ago." Sarah scrambled for her phone. She opened her banking app. "Access denied. Account status: frozen, pending investigation." "No," Sarah gasped. "No, you can't do that." "I just did," Audrey said. "And since money laundering is a crime in France as well, I took the liberty of sharing my findings with the gendarmerie." Sarah looked up. At the entrance to the terrace, 2 uniformed French police officers were speaking with the hotel manager. They pointed toward Sarah's table. "You witch," Sarah hissed, standing up, knocking her chair over. "You vindictive little—" "I'm not vindictive," Audrey said, remaining seated, perfectly calm. "I'm just thorough. You helped destroy my marriage. You helped ruin the lives of hundreds of tenants who lived in unsafe buildings just so you could buy designer purses. You're not a victim, Sarah. You're a parasite." The officers approached the table. "Mademoiselle Sarah Jenkins," the officer asked, "please come with us." Sarah looked at the ocean one last time, the freedom she had tasted for only a few weeks. Then she looked at Audrey. "He never loved you, you know," Sarah spat as the officers took her arms. "Liam, he never loved you." Audrey stood up. She walked close to Sarah, invading her space. "I know," Audrey said softly. "And he never loved you either. He loved himself. We were both just mirrors for his ego. The difference is, I shattered the mirror. You tried to steal it." She watched as the police led Sarah away through the horrified crowd of tourists. Audrey stood alone on the terrace. The sun was setting, painting the sky in hues of purple and gold. Her phone buzzed. It was a text from James. "It's done. The funds from Sarah's frozen accounts have been repatriated. We can transfer them to the Tenant Relief Fund immediately." Audrey typed back, "Do it." She walked to the edge of the balcony and looked out at the vast, endless horizon. 6 months ago, she had walked down a driveway in the rain with a duffel bag and a broken heart. She had been called a nobody, a gold digger, trash. Now she had cleaned house. The toxicity was gone. The debts were paid. The criminals were behind bars. She took a deep breath, filling her lungs with the salty sea air. For the first time in 3 years, she didn't feel like Audrey the heiress, or Audrey the wife, or Audrey the victim. She was just Audrey, and as she turned to walk back toward her waiting life, she realized that Liam was wrong about one thing. She hadn't left with nothing. She had left with the truth. And in the end, that was the only currency that mattered. And that is the story of how one woman turned her lowest moment into her greatest victory. They thought they could break her because she was kind. They thought she was weak because she was silent. But they forgot that the calmest ocean often hides the deepest depths and the fiercest storms. Liam and Sarah learned the hard way that you should never judge a book by its cover or a wife by her cardigan. Audrey didn't just get revenge, she got justice. She proved that dignity is worth more than any bank account. but having the bank account certainly helps when it's time to settle the score. What do you think? If you were Audrey, would you have saved the tenants? Or would you have walked away and let Liam deal with the mess he created? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of karma and redemption, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new story. We post new dramas every week. Thanks for watching. And remember, be careful who you underestimate.